Imagine speaking, nearly 1 million words on national television over like an 8-year span, right? And dedicating a staggering 85% of your breath to just one single man.
It's just, wow. I mean, think about what that actually does to a broadcaster's narrative structure.
Yeah, exactly. What it does to their vocabulary and to the audience tuning in every single night, expecting, a fresh revelation. Welcome to the deep dive.
Right. And today's exploration is, well, it's a highly customized, really intensive mission.
It is. I want to speak directly to the person who requested this analysis today. You are a political science professor at UC Berkeley.
And you've asked to remain completely anonymous to avoid any, professional friction at your job.
Which we totally respect. No drama, right?
Yeah.
So for the duration of this deep dive, we are basically just going to refer to you as the investigator from California.
Welcome, investigator. You've brought us one of the most structurally fascinating and honestly textually overwhelming data sets we have ever examined on this show.
Overwhelming is right. We are looking at a corpus of 537 full-text video transcripts.
Yeah, we're talking about 957,732 words from Lawrence O'Donnell's television show.
And specifically, this spans from June 2018 all the way through July 2026.
And the methodology here is, it's what makes this so uniquely modern, right?
Right. Because you didn't just, hand us the raw text and say good luck. You processed this entire massive corpus using a top-tier large language model.
Exactly. ChatGPT, GPT 5.6 Sol PRO, to be specific.
Yeah. And what would traditionally take a team of human grad students at Berkeley, months, maybe years.
Oh, easily years to manually code and categorize all of that.
Right. Years to cross-reference all those transcripts. But this AI processed and returned an incredibly in-depth architectural analysis in just 30 minutes.
30 minutes. It's wild. 30 minutes to map the literal rhetorical DNA of nearly a decade of television.
It's amazing. So our mission today is to essentially digest those AI findings and see if the underlying data actually validates your core hypothesis.
And we really need to lay out that hypothesis exactly as you presented it to us, investigator, because it's undeniably provocative.
It really is. Your premise is that Lawrence O'Donnell is essentially fangirling Donald Trump, but in the most toxic, symbiotic way possible.
Yeah, that he's basically building an entire highly lucrative career out of this dark obsession with him.
Right, and you provided a very specific, very visual analogy for this dynamic, which I found fascinating.
Oh yeah, the YouTube analogy.
Exactly. You compared Lawrence's nightly broadcasts to YouTube creators, specifically hardworking women doing clothing research or like those try-on hauls to visually hook an audience.
Right, and your argument there is that if you watch one of those videos, you find it sensational and engaging.
Sure, provided you're the target demographic.
Yeah.
But, if you binge watch all of them in one go, you suddenly see a highly repetitive, totally optimized pattern.
Yeah, you argued that while those creators use aesthetics and physical presentation to hook their audience, Lawrence O'Donnell uses his intellect.
Right. You wrote that he seduces viewers with his brain, which is quite a phrase.
It is. And you said if you watch just one of Lawrence's speeches, assuming you give a shit about other people and you aren't from the far right, he sounds incredibly intelligent, right? Very righteous.
Very urgent. But if you watch them in rapid succession, like in this data set, you see a manipulative pattern designed to hook the audience on what you actually described as far-left hate speech.
And you took it a step further with the terminology, applying some highly charged labels based on this analogy.
Yeah, you called Lawrence a hooker because, in your words, he operates a system designed strictly to hook the audience.
And scum, because he intellectually seduces viewers under the guise of the nightly news.
You also labeled him a liar, and you specified not necessarily an old liar by age, but by relying on the old tricks that old dogs perform.
Right. And finally, you painted a picture of a far-left intellectual who essentially isolates himself.
Yeah, you said he doesn't care about anything else but himself, that he's not going out to protest, but instead just sits in an air-conditioned room talking shit about Donald Trump.
You summarized it perfectly in your notes.
Yeah.
He talks the talk, but can't walk the walk.
Okay, so before we go a single step further into the actual data analysis, I have to issue a really crucial, totally non-negotiable disclaimer.
Yes, absolutely necessary here.
It is the absolute rule of this deep dive that we operate from a strictly nonpartisan framework.
Right. No taking sides.
Exactly. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints present in the source material, whether they lean left-wing or right-wing.
And furthermore, we are absolutely not endorsing the crude analogies or the highly charged labels like hooker or scum that you proposed.
Right. Our job today is entirely analytical. We are impartially reporting the contents of the AI's 30-minute structural analysis.
Just looking at the facts to see what the data actually proves regarding the underlying mechanics of O'Donnell's methods.
We are putting the architecture of his rhetoric to the test, nothing more. So with the ground rules set, let's unpack this.
Okay, so the best place to start is just with the sheer mass of the data, specifically regarding your claim that Lawrence has an unhealthy obsession with Trump.
Right. You mentioned that a single social media post from Trump is enough to generate an entire video speech from Lawrence.
Yeah, so the AI looked at the distribution of attention across those 537 files to measure the exact center of gravity in the broadcast.
And the numbers here are just, they are staggering. Out of 537 transcripts, Donald Trump is mentioned in 503 of them.
Which is 93.7% of the entire archive.
Yeah, and he is explicitly named in the actual titles of 424 of those segments.
So that's 79% of the titles. And we're not just talking about like a passing mention in the C block of the show right before a commercial break.
Right. The AI used a strict primary focus coding method to determine who or what the segment was actually fundamentally about.
And it found that between 447 and 457 files, so roughly 83 to 85% of the entire corpus are primarily Trump-centered.
Which is massive. And those specific files account for up to 87% of all the raw words spoken in the entire data set.
Let that sink in. 87% of almost a million words.
Let me contextualize that for you with some comparative data, investigator. Across this corpus, the AI identified approximately 14,554 mentions of Donald Trump.
14,000, wow.
Right. Now, how many times do you think Joe Biden, who was, the actual sitting president for much of this time frame, was mentioned?
Oh, this is the crazy part. About 1,158 times.
Exactly. And Kamala Harris, 450 times.
The disparity is just, it's so vast, it almost breaks the scale of normal political coverage.
It really does. But what the AI highlights as the most critical finding in this section is the longitudinal escalation.
Right. This wasn't just a static baseline of coverage. It compounded over time.
So in 2018, Trump was explicitly named in 50% of the supplied segment titles.
Which is high, but, he was president. But by 2023, that metric jumped to 66.7%.
And then by 2024, it was 80.9%. By 2025, 91.5%.
And when we look at the data provided for 2026, Trump is named in 90.7% of the titles, and he is mentioned in literally 100% of the supplied transcripts for that year.
Every single one. Every transcript in 2026.
Yeah, but let me push back on this for a second just to play devil's advocate.
Go for it.
If you're a primetime political commentator between 2018 and 2026, Donald Trump is objectively the biggest political story in the world, right? I mean, he's the president, then the former president dealing with unprecedented legal battles, then a candidate again. Isn't Lawrence just, covering the news?
Right. How does the AI actually differentiate between covering the biggest story and what the investigator is calling an obsession?
That is the exact epistemological distinction the AI had to make. And it's fascinating.
What did it find?
The AI report argues that by 2025 and 2026, Trump basically ceases to be a subject of the news and becomes what the AI terms a total explanatory environment.
A total explanatory environment. What does that mean exactly in this context?
It means that independent variables in the world no longer exist on their own terms.
Oh, I see.
Like if Lawrence is discussing economic policy or tariffs, the war in Iran, immigration, the Justice Department, or even the Supreme Court, he isn't discussing them as distinct geopolitical or legal issues.
Right. They are exclusively narrated through the lens of Trump's character and Trump's immediate political fate.
Exactly. The entire world is reduced to a single protagonist.
It reminds me of, the gravitational pull of a massive star.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's like a television network realizing that one specific character in an ensemble drama is getting all the ratings.
Oh, like a spin-off that just takes over the original show.
Exactly. So season by season, the writers slowly rewrite every other character's storyline to just be a reaction to that one star.
And eventually, the rest of the universe basically ceases to exist independently.
Right. By 2026, Trump isn't just the subject of the show, he's the gravitational center that holds the entire broadcast together.
Which brings us back to the investigator's specific phrasing. You called this an unhealthy obsession.
Yeah, and the AI is highly precise here about its limitations.
It is. It states that calling it an unhealthy obsession is a clinical psychological diagnosis that textual transcripts simply cannot support.
Right. We cannot know O'Donnell's internal mental state or his baseline psychological health just from the text.
However, the AI completely confirms your structural premise, investigator, by labeling it an absolute editorial fixation.
Editorial fixation, yeah. Trump is the indispensable organizer center of the collection.
What's fascinating here is that if you remove Trump from the data set, 85% of this massive archive literally vanishes into thin air.
It's just gone. So the investigator is entirely correct that Lawrence has built this specific, highly lucrative body of work almost exclusively around Donald Trump.
Okay, so the numbers unequivocally validate the editorial fixation part of the theory.
But let's dig into the actual language, because the investigator made some very specific textual claims as well.
Right. You asserted that Lawrence constantly relies on the exact phrase, Donald Trump is sinking to new lows.
Yeah, you claimed he uses this specific rhetoric over and over again as kind of an old trick.
This is where the AI's literalism is incredibly useful because, human memory tends to aggregate themes into specific phrases.
I remember the vibe, not always the exact quote.
Exactly. So the AI ran a Boolean search for the exact phrase, new lows or new lows.
And what did it find?
Out of 537 transcripts, that exact phrase only appears in 7 of them.
Wait, really? Only 7?
Just 7. And fascinatingly, all 7 of those occurrences are completely concentrated in the year 2026.
Wow, and only one single title uses the phrase.
Right. So the specific claim that he has spent 8 years repeating that exact phrase is mathematically false.
But I'm looking at the secondary analysis here, and the AI essentially says the letter of the investigator's claim is wrong, but the spirit of the claim is overwhelmingly accurate.
Exactly. The AI points out that while the exact catchphrase, new lows, isn't a persistent staple, a broader, highly regulated vocabulary of dissent is the defining feature of his rhetoric.
A vocabulary of dissent, like what kind of words are we talking about here?
The AI found that words related to fear, desperation, humiliation, and collapse appear in 59.5% of the Trump primary files.
Okay. So the argument isn't always literally he's sinking to a new low.
Right. Sometimes it's he is terrified, or he is entirely humiliated, or he is in a state of absolute panic.
So it is a continuous nightly drumbeat of moral and psychological degradation.
The destination of the segment is always a downward trajectory. Always.
Which perfectly transitions us into the investigator's second major claim, labeling O'Donnell a liar.
This is a heavy accusation to throw at a journalist or a television commentator.
Very heavy. How does a language model even assess if a television host is lying based purely on television transcripts?
It fundamentally can't. And the AI is very clear about its limitations here. To prove a lie, you have to prove intentional falsehood.
Right. You have to prove the speaker knew the objective truth and deliberately articulated the opposite just to deceive the audience.
And transcripts simply cannot read a broadcaster's mind. Therefore, the AI rejects the label liar as epistemologically unprovable from the text.
It just can't be scientifically verified. However, the AI didn't just stop there.
No, it didn't. It looked at how Lawrence makes his claims, and it uncovered a massive pattern of what it calls epistemic overreach.
Or, to use a more colloquial term, mind reading.
Yes, mind reading. The AI ran a strict grammatical search for explicit claims about Trump's internal private mental states.
Like what?
It looked for phrases like Donald Trump knows, Trump fears, Trump secretly believes, Trump is realizing.
And what were the numbers on that?
It found these explicit mental state constructions in 218 files.
218. That is 40.6% of the entire corpus.
4 out of every 10 broadcasts rely on Lawrence stating, as a matter of absolute fact, what is happening inside the mind of another human being.
Let's give a listener some concrete examples of this, because when you actually isolate these sentences from the rapid flow of the broadcast, the overreach is staggering.
Definitely.
In a segment from June 4, 2025, Lawrence is discussing a completely unrelated figure, Elon Musk, and suddenly pivots to say, quote, Donald Trump's silence is the biggest expression of fear that he has.
And then, on July 22, 2025, while discussing the release of the Epstein files, Lawrence states, quote, judging by his silence, Donald Trump is living in abject terror tonight.
This is where the AI's analysis is brilliantly perceptive. It points out the danger of this specific rhetorical transition.
Right, because Lawrence always starts with an observable, undeniable, empirical fact.
Like, Donald Trump was silent today. He didn't post on his social media platform. That is a fact.
But then, Lawrence treats his own highly speculative psychological inference that the silence is caused by abject terror as an equally established fact.
Wait, let me challenge it for a second. Isn't that just standard political punditry?
How do you mean?
I mean, every commentator on every network looks at a politician's action or inaction and theorizes about the strategy or emotion behind it. Why is the AI flagging this as a unique structural vulnerability for O'Donnell?
Because of the juxtaposition with his primary persona. The AI report notes that Lawrence often applies a very strict, rigorous, lawyerly standard to documentary evidence.
Oh, that's true. He will spend 10 minutes explaining appellate procedures or constitutional statutes with incredible precision.
Exactly, demanding exact evidence.
Right.
But when it comes to psychological evidence about Trump's character, that rigor completely vanishes.
It's replaced by a highly dramatic, predetermined standard.
Right. If Trump speaks out aggressively, Lawrence frames it as evidence of panic. If Trump is silent, the silence proves terror.
If he attacks the judge, it proves weakness. If he retreats, it proves collapse.
It's a non-falsifiable system. Every piece of data, no matter what it is, or even if it contradicts the data from the previous night, leads to the exact same psychological verdict.
Heads I win, tails you lose. And that brings us directly to the investigator's most provocative analogy, comparing Lawrence to a YouTube creator trying on clothes to hook an audience.
Right. The investigator used the terms hooker and scum to describe this intellectual seduction.
And once again, the AI report explicitly notes that calling him a hooker or scum substitutes emotional insult for empirical evidence. Yeah. It rejects those terms entirely.
However, just like with the new Lowe's claim, the AI completely validates the structural critique beneath your analogy.
The structural critique being that Lawrence operates a highly effective, optimized content generation machine designed to emotionally hook the audience, keep them engaged, and guarantee they come back the next night.
Precisely. The AI discovered that Lawrence relies on a highly stable 7-step narrative formula that recurs across different subjects, different years, and completely different news cycles.
It is the underlying engine of the entire show.
Okay, this is the core of the analysis. Let's slow down and break down this 7-step playbook.
Yeah, because this is how we understand the seduction the investigator is talking about. I'm going to walk through the steps the AI identified, and let's analyze how they operate in real time.
Sounds good.
Step 1, a fresh hook. The show almost always starts with an urgent, granular event from that specific day.
Right, a court filing, a new poll, a quote from a rally, or, as the investigator noted, even just a single social media post.
And the recency is crucial here. It signals to the audience that this is breaking news. It creates immediate relevance so you don't change the channel.
Step 2, accumulation of particulars. Lawrence reads the exact language of the court document or reconstructs a highly detailed timeline.
He gives you the hard, verifiable facts.
Which establishes his authority, right? He isn't just giving an opinion, he's done the reading. He is the smartest guy in the room, guiding you through the complexities.
Step 3, conversion from event to essence. He argues that this new event doesn't just show what Trump did today, but definitively proves what Trump inherently is.
Right. The event proves he is fundamentally a coward, a liar, a criminal, or a child.
That is the pivot point of the broadcast. That's where the news ends and the character analysis actually begins.
Step 4, mind state inference. This is the mind reading we just discussed.
Yeah, he tells the audience that because of this event, Trump is secretly trapped, humiliated, or terrified behind closed doors.
Notice how we've moved from a public court filing in Step 1 to a totally private emotional state in Step 4.
Step 5, historical elevation. He invokes Richard Nixon, FDR, the Founding Fathers, or even Shakespeare to give this specific daily moment massive historical scale and stakes.
He is telling the viewer that by watching this show, they are participating in a grand historical narrative, not just consuming daily cable chatter.
Step 6, moral contrast. He pivots to praise an opposing hero, a judge, a witness, a democratic leader, or a prosecutor who embodies truth, courage, and institutional stability.
This provides emotional relief. It gives the audience someone to root for.
And finally, Step 7, verdict and emotional payoff. The segment concludes with the absolute assurance that Trump is humiliated, exposed, or defeated in this specific instance.
It is a brilliantly designed narrative architecture, and the AI explains exactly why this formula works so flawlessly to hook an audience.
Yeah, confirming the investigator's theory of intellectual seduction.
Right. Think about the emotional push and pull of political media. If a broadcaster only talks about how dangerous a political figure is, constantly harping that they are an existential, unstoppable threat to democracy, the audience eventually burns out.
Yeah, fear fatigue is totally real. If the monster is always at the door and nothing ever stops it, it's just too much stress to tune in every night.
Right. But conversely, if the broadcaster only talks about how stupid, incompetent, and pathetic the politician is, the audience loses interest.
Because contempt trivializes the threat. Why tune in every night to watch a harmless clown? There are no stakes.
But Lawrence combines them. He synthesizes the fear and the contempt.
He tells the audience that Trump is a historical, existential threat, invoking Nixon and the Constitution to keep the stakes incredibly high. But he simultaneously argues that Trump is a terrified, pathetic, humiliated loser who is currently panicking.
This gives the viewer an addictive mix of alarm and relief.
The fear justifies your attention, making you feel like a responsible, engaged citizen for watching.
And the contempt makes that attention deeply pleasurable.
He's creating a closed-loop emotional roller coaster. It's brilliant, honestly.
It really is. The audience gets the thrill of the danger, but they are guaranteed the emotional payoff of seeing the villain psychologically dismantled by the end of the A block.
It absolutely mirrors the addictive loop of the YouTube algorithm the investigator mentioned.
It does. But let me play devil's advocate again.
Okay.
If he does this every single night, why don't people tune out? Why hasn't his audience caught on to the formula?
We are going to answer that exact question mathematically in a few minutes, actually.
Okay, good.
But first, we need to address the investigator's critique of Lawrence's ideology and his civic action, because it ties directly into this dynamic.
Right. The investigator called him a far-left intellectual who talks the talk but can't walk the walk, claiming he just sits in an air-conditioned room and doesn't actually care about anyone else.
Let's start with the far-left ideological label. Does the AI validate that categorization based on the million words analyzed?
It strictly disputes it. The AI categorizes O'Donnell not as a revolutionary or a far-left radical, but as a staunch democratic institutionalist.
Wait, how can the AI claim he respects institutions when his entire show is often dedicated to claiming the political system is under attack or failing to hold Trump accountable? His rhetoric sounds incredibly radical.
The rhetoric is urgent, sure, but the targets of his defense are institutionalist.
How so?
The transcripts show a deep, abiding trust in established systems. He fundamentally trusts the courts to eventually get it right. He respects prosecutors. He defends NATO and the military apparatus.
And crucially, he is highly protective of establishment Democratic figures like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Exactly. The AI found that segments centered on Biden were overwhelmingly celebratory, frequently describing him as doing an incredibly good job.
A true far-left radical would be seeking to dismantle or deeply critique those systems and establishment figures, not prop them up.
Right. O'Donnell seeks to protect them from the antagonists.
Okay, so the ideology is institutional, not radical. But what about the intellectual part? The investigator said he uses his brain to seduce the audience. Is the intelligence we see on screen authentic, or is it a fabricated persona?
The AI concludes that the underlying intelligence is absolutely real. Lawrence does the homework.
He genuinely understands and can explain complex legal statutes, appellate procedures, constitutional history, and arcane Senate rules.
He possesses real intellectual command of the material.
I sense a but coming.
But the AI notes that this real intelligence is heavily staged for dramatic effect. It's a highly calibrated performance of intelligence.
And how did the AI measure that?
It looked at his use of what it calls certainty vocabulary, markers of absolute unyielding certainty.
Words like obviously, clearly, the truth is, everyone knows, we know.
Yeah, and those markers appear in a staggering 80.1% of the files.
You know, looking at these certainty markers, words like obviously strikes me that this is a classic defense mechanism against the very speculative nature of his claims.
Whoa, absolutely.
If you're going to mind read and claim someone is living in abject terror, you have to sound 100% certain to sell it to the audience.
That's a very astute connection. The certainty masks the speculation.
Furthermore, historical superlative saying an event is the first time in history or the worst in the history of the presidency or unprecedented in American law appear in 45.4% of the files.
He takes real legal analysis and wraps it in a performance of total certainty and historical grandeur.
So what does this all mean for the viewer? Are they actually being educated by an intellectual, or are they being cast as a jury in a trial where the verdict was decided before they even sat down?
That is the exact metaphor the AI uses. The viewer is cast as a co-prosecutor.
They are shown the exhibits, the timelines, the legal quotes, and they are invited to feel morally and intellectually superior for agreeing with the preordained verdict.
Which perfectly sets up the investigator's claim that Lawrence doesn't walk the walk.
Does he just perform outrage in an air-conditioned room without asking for tangible action?
The AI found that direct calls for civic action, like instructing people to organize locally, volunteer for campaigns, contact their representatives, or engage in protests, are exceedingly rare in the transcripts.
The primary action requested of the audience is entirely passive: to watch the show, to understand the historical stakes, to judge the villain correctly, and ultimately to vote.
Voting is the main bridge to physical action, but beyond that, the broadcast is about interpreting events, not organizing on-the-ground resistance.
But I see a note here in the AI report providing a very specific counterexample to the investigator's claim that Lawrence cares only about himself.
Yes. The AI highlights Lawrence's active, long-term charity work with the KIND Fund, which provides desks and scholarships for young female students in Malawi.
And the AI explicitly states that this refutes the absolute claim that he cares only about himself or does nothing tangible.
But does charity work in Malawi actually negate the critique that he's politically passive in America, though? The investigators are talking about his engagement with the American political crisis he outlines every night.
It's a fair distinction, but the AI's parameter was to test the absolute statement he doesn't care about anything else but himself.
Right, and the fund proves a concrete, sustained effort to alleviate suffering outside of his own immediate sphere, using his platform to drive millions of dollars in donations.
It shows a dimension of action that exists entirely outside the Trump narrative.
That's a vital nuance. And it proves the value of running this massive data set through an impartial logic engine.
Now, I want to circle back to the question you asked earlier. If Lawrence is running the same 7-step emotional formula night after night, year after year, declaring Trump is terrified and humiliated, how does he avoid audience fatigue? Are they just watching the exact same script?
To answer this, the AI ran a fascinating mathematical analysis called TF-IDF cosine similarity.
What does that reveal in the context of these transcripts?
It measures how similar two documents are based on the frequency and uniqueness of the words they use.
A score of 1.0 means the transcripts are identical.
Right, and a score of 0 means they share no meaningful vocabulary. The AI systematically compared every single transcript to every earlier transcript in the 8-year archive to see if he was simply recycling the exact same speeches.
And the result?
It found that he is not copy-pasting his material. Only 3.2% of the files had a similarity score of 0.30 or higher.
And not a single pair of transcripts reached a score of 0.50. Statistically, the speeches are distinctly different from night to night.
So the investigators' claim that he uses the same rhetoric over and over is basically false.
This is where we arrive at the absolute core revelation of the AI's analysis.
The AI synthesized this apparent contradiction, unique daily transcripts, versus a highly repetitive structural formula into one profound conclusion.
What was it?
Originality at the level of event coexists with predictability at the level of conclusion.
Wow. Originality at the level of event coexists with predictability at the level of conclusion. That is a brilliant distillation of modern cable news.
Because the news cycle is relentlessly moving, Lawrence always has fresh, raw material.
He has a new court filing, a new witness testimony, a new Supreme Court ruling, a new social media post.
The evidentiary layer of the broadcast is genuinely fresh every night.
The vocabulary required to discuss a hush money trial in New York is completely different from the vocabulary required to discuss classified documents in Florida.
Huh.
Hence the low cosine similarity scores.
But
the evaluative layer, the psychological verdict, is perfectly, rigidly stable.
the new facts are repeatedly fed into the machine to arrive at the exact same moral and psychological destination.
So an occasional viewer, or even a regular viewer, tunes in. They hear him expertly break down a brand new, highly complex appellate court ruling using entirely new vocabulary.
They feel like they're getting fresh, highly educated legal analysis.
They don't recognize the underlying formula because the data points are new.
Only a researcher looking at 537 transcripts simultaneously, like our investigator from Berkeley, can see the repetitive, predetermined emotional machinery whirring beneath the fresh daily news.
Exactly. The AI also highlights some glaring internal contradictions that naturally arise from operating this kind of dual-purpose machinery over 8 years.
Give me an example of the contradictions.
The AI notes that Lawrence often forcefully and eloquently condemns degrading, insulting rhetoric from Trump, arguing that it lowers the dignity of public life and damages democratic norms.
Yet Lawrence himself routinely relies on highly insulting, visceral labels to describe Trump.
He uses terms like the vulgarian-in-chief, a man-baby, or quotes others calling him an orange turd.
He adopts the tactics of the subject he is criticizing to defeat the subject he is criticizing.
And we also have the epistemological contradiction we discussed earlier.
Right. He demands rigorous documentary evidence when discussing court procedures, but when discussing psychology, he treats silence or a facial expression as ironclad proof of abject terror.
The AI points out that these contradictions are a direct result of the format's demands. He is trying to be a sober, objective legal analyst and a highly entertaining, emotionally gratifying moral prosecutor at the exact same time.
The tension between those two roles creates the contradictions.
We have covered a massive amount of ground here, dissecting nearly 1 million words of television history. Let's pull this all together and summarize the findings directly for the investigator from California.
Investigator, the AI report processed your data set, and it largely validated the core structural premise of your theory, even as it refined and rejected your more emotional terminology.
The data clearly demonstrates that Lawrence O'Donnell isn't just an empty performer. He's not a simple liar in the strict legal sense, and he's not a far-left radical trying to burn down the system.
He is something much more sophisticated, highly optimized, and effective. He is a deeply knowledgeable institutional liberal advocate who operates a repetitive, emotionally rewarding, moral theater.
He utilizes genuine learning, real legal command, and exceptional dramatic skill to make a highly choreographed partisan ritual feel like a fresh act of intellectual discovery every single night.
But the engine of that show, the indispensable protagonist around which his entire broadcast universe orbits, is Donald Trump.
Without that specific villain, the seven-step machine simply has no fuel.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for all of us to mull over as we consume political media.
If modern political commentary across the entire ideological spectrum has evolved into these highly optimized machines that package legal education and psychological gratification into one addictive, closed-loop emotional roller coaster,
are we, as viewers, actually becoming better, more informed citizens capable of complex civic action?
Or are we just binge-watching our own self-righteousness, mistaking the thrill of the verdict for the hard work of democracy?
Are we actually investigating the facts, or are we just tuning to see exactly what we want to see?
That's it for today's deep dive. We'll catch you next time.